Oxen of Choice by Literally Mad Lad on AO3. Episode 18, Chapter 6, Oh to be a Merman Among Barflies. There was no telling how long or how far he had been carried down the stream. He couldn't recognize anything more than the stars overhead, which were graying out closer to the horizon. There was still a dusting of sunlight on the horizon, but Katsuki couldn't be certain if the sun or if it was light pollution. The tree behind him loomed, and the hills ahead him seemed manageable enough. He could hear something beyond it, something like rattling, like a metal door in a cave. Katsuki pushed to his knees, stumbling, and took 2 tries to stand with his hands pushed against the grass. He half crawled up the hill, using the rock rivers to foot for his ascent. The pebbles trickled down him, beneath him, before at last coming to a stop when he reached the vantage point. From there, he could make out the shape of a distant road, and before that, a beam of light splitting across the trees. A deafening honking rattled Katsuki's sensitive eardrums. He winced, pressed the hands to his ears, as the metal racking came closer. So close, in fact, that he could feel it resonating in the ground. It shook up the bones of his new legs and nearly sent him tumbling back into the river. He caught himself, dropping onto his bum, when he watched the beam of light split past him at the head of a fast-moving line of metal firelights. Katsuki covered his ears, but he could feel the vibration in his jaw as he clenched his teeth and tried to drown out the sound. The gust of wind from the blur of metal nearly knocked him over again when he stood up. Even though the muffling of his hands, he could catch the sound of a distant word. "Kid! Hey, kid!" Katsuki startled at the sudden vice around his arms, halting him back. His hands were ripped from his ears, and the muffling popped into a catastrophe of noises. He barely managed to sneer at the face of a complete stranger before the guy was saying, "Kid, what the hell are you doing so close to the tracks?" Katsuki's immediate reaction was to hiss at him, but caught himself mid-snarl. He shook his head, half-shrugged like Deku did when the assistant used to ask him questions he didn't know the answer to. The man was far taller and far older than Katsuki, and looked like he was overdue for a checkup at the doctor's. His gaunt expression made his eyes eerily hooded around heavy brows, which was pulled in, tight with concern. His eyes dropped down to Katsuki's bare feet, and the state of his rattly clothes. The man dropped his hands from Katsuki's shoulders, and looked around like he was expecting someone else to come out of nowhere. Katsuki looked as well, considering he hadn't seen or heard the man before the guy shook his adrenaline into overdrive. "You with anyone, kid?" the man said, and Katsuki just stared at him. The man sighed, narrowed shoulders slumping. His head looked too big for his scrawny body. "You heading anywhere in particular? Back into town?" It became clear that Katsuki had no intent of talking, but he had no intent of walking away either. The train was still barreling past. The end wasn't in sight yet. "Well," the man huffed, hobbling back to where he had hastily dropped his things near the river. "I'll wait with you until we could cross. All right, I'm just on my way back to the train when it came in. Bit of a good coincidence." The box on the ground started to rattle as the man tipped it onto its flat bottom and began plucking shiny objects out of the grass. Katsuki stepped closer until the man said, "Careful, dropped a couple of hooks. Don't want you to step on them." Katsuki crouched down close to the ground. His eyes were still adjusted to the dark as the sun faded away, so he could only see the hooks in the grass. Even the man brought out a flashlight. Katsuki nabbed one that had a shiny, colorful, overall attachment on it. The man took it and dropped it in the box. "You ever fish?" the man asked. Katsuki figured that fishing meant in the sense of the intruders and how they used to fish, so he shook his head. "No, I haven't," Katsuki said, voice rough. "I'm a big fly fisher myself," the man said. "The rapids back that way aren't very conducive for it." The man rambled nonsense over things Katsuki didn't particularly care about. It had been so long since he heard another person's voice that he was more enthralled by the intones of his voice. He would pause now and again to clear his throat, violently, or cough off to the side. It sounded like his lungs were caving in with some nameless fluid that rattled with each cough. Katsuki didn't ask about it and pretended to ignore it when it happened. When the tracks cleared, the old man started forward, the box under one arm and a fishing pole in the other hand. Katsuki followed him after. They were both rather slow to cross. Katsuki because his feet weren't quite prepared to handle the road tracks, and the old man because he was old. Katsuki helped carry the box after a time. The walk to the old man's car was quiet, all except for just about everything in the wilderness, from the river to the trees to the grass under his feet, to the man's old labored breaths. The man's truck was parked in an otherwise abandoned lot surrounded by trees. He dropped the back doors down so Katsuki could stride the box up onto the bed of the truck for him. The fishing pole went in after. Afterwards, Katsuki stood back and stared as the man took a few tentative steps around the truck and stopped multiple times to look back at Katsuki. "Do you need a ride, kid?" the man asked, gesturing to the truck. Katsuki blinked. The man sighed. "Tell you what, kid. Get in the passenger seat and I'll take you into town. It'll be too much of a hike with you without your shoes." With that said, the man pulled open a side door on the truck and climbed inside. He reached a hand out of the window to gesture for Katsuki to get in the opposite side. Katsuki had only seen cars from afar, and the time Deku and the assistant transported him into the facility to the caves didn't count. He approached, hesitant, and the semi-tinted windows were too dark now for him to see whether or not the old man was watching him. Katsuki opened the door and pushed himself up. The seat was high off the ground, and he used the steps to give himself a boost. The door itself was heavier than expected, and it took 2 hands to swing it back into place. Okay. Wow. Alright, okay. Katsuki's Stranger Danger. 1, I thought it was a car at first, but no, it was a train. 2, Stranger Danger. Who's the guy? Wait, is it Yagi? It says old man. Yagi isn't that... Well, I mean, he is old. Okay, maybe it is Yagi. I mean, the coughing makes me think it's Yagi. Is it All Might? I think it's All Might. I'm gonna safely assume that it is All Might. My worry is... If Katsuki goes into town... how is Izuku gonna find him? How is Izuku gonna... Okay, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.